We do have a lot to cover today, so I want to hand it off right away to Dr. Howe, and she will present with us. Dr. Howe.
All right, thank you very much. Can you see my screen? Does everyone see my screen?
We do.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you. Good afternoon and welcome. I'm going to be presenting some information today on how our forensic labs transition from what we refer to as ISO accreditation and how the ME portion of our operation is beginning to move in that direction as well. In addition to serving a 4-county ME district surrounding Fort Worth, Texas, our office operates a full-service forensic lab that not only supports the pathologist but also offers fee-for-service analysis to law enforcement as well as both prosecution and defense attorneys. So we have a crime laboratory that consists of DNA, trace evidence, latent prints, and firearm and tool mark sections, a toxicology laboratory in which forensic tox functions support the ME office, and we also do DWI casework within that laboratory. We have a drug chemistry laboratory that does pills and powder solid dose drug analysis, as well as a breath alcohol calibration laboratory. We do have a human identification laboratory as well. About 95% of our unidentified decedents are subsequently identified through the use of fingerprints. But we have a full-time anthropologist on staff as well as an odontologist, and we have smaller histology and forensic photography laboratories that support the office as well. Dr. Nizam Pirwani is our chief ME. He's been here more than 30 years. We do approximately 3,500 autopsies annually with a staff of 6 pathologists, including a forensic fellow. The crime lab and the tox labs are accredited to ISO 17025 through the American Society of Crime Lab Directors Laboratory Accreditation Board, which is now ANAB, which is the ANSI ASQ National Accreditation Board. We run a forensic fellowship program out of our office, and our ME operations are currently accredited through the traditional name program. But as we have all heard, as a part of that ANAB name strategic alliance, ME offices will now have the opportunity to become accredited to ISO 17020 as well as the traditional name standards. And Dr. Pirwani has let us know that it is his desire for us to start moving in that direction. What is accreditation and why does it matter? Accreditation is really just an assessment of conformance with a set of defined standards. So if we think about the name standards or the ISO 17020 standards, those are the requirements with which we are required to conform. Standards provide those requirements to ensure that materials that we use or services that we provide are fit for purpose. Fit for purpose is used quite a bit within the ISO standards documents. They establish and ensure our ongoing competence for the services that we provide. Accreditation applies to organizations and systems, not to individuals. So we think of licensing and certifications applying to individuals, but accreditation to organizations. And accreditation provides a framework on which to base our operations. So accrediting bodies don't typically tell you how to meet their requirements, but they tell you that you need a documented procedure, for example, for how you conduct those inspections or meet the standards and the requirements of that standards document. And accreditation provides customers with assurances of compliance with good practices. ISO accreditation is managed by the International Organization for Standardization in conjunction with the International Electrotechnical Commission, and we typically think of 3 ISO standards that pertain to forensic science. ISO 17025 is the standard to which our forensic laboratories are accredited. This standard applies to testing and calibration functions, and typically it involves analytical instrumentation that is used to generate data. So if we think about drug chemistry analysis, for example, on a white powder, or DNA typing on a blood stain, 17025 is the appropriate accreditation standard. ISO 17020 is relevant to our discussions today. That standard applies to inspection bodies. Some police crime scene units have been accredited to ISO 17020. Some laboratories that have limited forensic services involving primarily the comparative forensic disciplines like latent prints have also been accredited to 17020. This standard applies to situations in which professional judgment is used to form an opinion. So to use a pathology example, if in your professional judgment a heart is enlarged, you use your own training and experience to come to that determination, but you may also refer to published averages or norms. And the use of 17020 is very appropriate, therefore, in a medical legal death investigation setting. One additional ISO standard that applies to forensics, and that's ISO 17043. These are standards that pertain to requirements for proficiency test providers, don't typically apply to laboratories or ME offices. So those of us that have been through ISO assessments know that there is an ISO mantra, and that mantra is, if it isn't written down, it never happened. So if you think about your policies and procedures, your training of individuals within the office, your authorizations for subsequent casework within the office, every time an ISO standard document has the words shall or must followed by any of these words on the list, shall or must document, maintain, define, specify, review, all of those are indicators within that ISO document that these things need to be written down and documented. And this is where a very good, a robust document management system can help you in your accreditation efforts. I wanted to talk a little bit about document control. Document control is a large part of ISO 17020 and 17025, and it really applies to policies, procedures, and work instructions in which you want to restrict access for viewing, in which ensure that the most recent version is available, and in which approval of those documents you want to restrict to certain individuals within the office. And so, for example, I should not be approving Dr. Pirwani's autopsy procedures, just as he would not be approving our technical procedural documents within the laboratory. So 17020, Section 832, requires that you define the controls needed to approve documents, to review documents, update and make any changes to documents, reapprove those updates, identify those changes so people using the documents know what has been changed. The 17020-832 requires you to make those documents available at the point of use where those individuals are actually using the policies and procedures as work instructions, for example. You need to ensure that those documents are legible and readily identifiable, and you need to prevent the unintended use of obsolete documents. So no one should be using an earlier version of a controlled document to perform their work, for example. I'm going to just very briefly show you a document within our Qualtrics document management system and show you how we have used that system to control our documents. If you look at this control document, this happens to be our Laboratory Services Quality Manager, you will see that the footer on this document readily identifies who has approved the document, readily identifies the title of the document. Qualtrics affixes a very unique document identification number to each document that is retained with that document throughout that document's life cycle. So revision 1 of this document had the same document ID number as does revision 8, This happens to be revision 8. This document has been revised quite a bit, and here's the date on which that document was published. If we go in and look at the properties of this document within Qualtrics, we can see who approved the document and when they did that, any comments associated with that approval, and all of the changes that went into effect with this version of that document. I also have the ability to scroll down and to look at, I also have the ability to look at the document history and to look at earlier versions of the document. So here we can pull up the PDF of version 8, but if I scroll down, I can look at version 7. So I can look at earlier versions of that document as well, but individuals who are actually utilizing this document on a day-to-day basis are restricted to accessing only the current and approved version of that document. We can set within our document control software who needs to approve these documents and in what order, who needs to review the document and in what order, and then very importantly, who is notified when that document is published. Who receives an email saying, there have been changes made to this document, please review those changes, and here are all the changes that have been made. And then we also control access to the document through the security settings within our software, which allows us to establish permissions for who has access to that particular document. I'll talk for a minute about records as well. We post records within our document management software to satisfy many of the documentation requirements within 17025. Records are considered to be static documents that we post as demonstration that we have satisfied 17025 requirements. So we will post audit and assessment records, customer satisfaction surveys and complaints, equipment preventive maintenance and service records, and we post a lot of information regarding personnel. So these are not HR records, but rather they are things like work authorizations, job descriptions, training records, etc. So I'll look at our document tree within Qualtrics as well. You will see that our crime laboratory, our toxicology laboratory, our laboratory-wide quality management system, and our medical examiner all have separate folders within Qualtrics. I'm going to explore the crime lab folder just a little bit with you. It's a little more fleshed out than some of our other folders currently. We are currently working on expanding the medical examiner portion of our system. But I'll go into this management documents folder and just talk a little bit about what we post as records within our system. We post records of all of our annual quality management system reviews, all of our communications with our accrediting body. We post records of our internal and external audits and assessments. We post records of all of our customer satisfaction and complaints, extensive records on our equipment and maintenance of that equipment and service on that equipment, key logs that document who has access to what portions of our facility, and then our personnel records are posted here as well. We post appointments to particular positions within the office, authorizations to perform certain types of analyses within the laboratory, and individual examiner advanced certifications that they may hold. We post their job descriptions so that they are fully aware of all of the requirements of their jobs and who they report to in their positions. We provide statements of qualifications for those individuals and then extensive documentation of their training. And then we document their education within Qualtrics as well. Lastly, I want to talk about workflow design within Qualtrics. Workflows are typically multi-step processes that involve more than one individual for completion. So if you think about all the processes within your office in which in the past you may have taken a piece of paper and shuffled it around the office trying to get signatures or approvals for that process, these within our office have been replaced largely by workflows within Qualtrics. And when we did a gap analysis to determine where we met the 17025 requirements and where we were lacking, we put workflows into place for processes that needed expansion or additional documentation, or processes that we didn't have at the time and needed to be established. So we have a number of workflows within Qualtrics that have replaced some very cumbersome and involved paper-based processes. We track all of our proficiency testing in the laboratory through a workflow. We monitor the testimony of our analysts through a workflow. We approve vendors of critical supplies and services through a workflow. We use a number of different workflows for many of the requirements within the ISO standard. If you look at these three workflows in blue font at the bottom, those are the workflows that we have implemented through our medical examiner side of our operation. Our quality manager, tracks the expiration of our pathologist medical licenses through a Qualtrics workflow, documents corrective and preventive actions, and then office-wide, we do our purchasing through Qualtrics as well. I'm going to talk about a corrective action workflow. The 17020 document has a section that addresses corrective actions, and those corrective actions are required when you need to identify and manage nonconformities. So nonconformities are really just issues where something bad has happened, something has gone off the rails, something has not complied with a policy or procedure, a positive control is out of range, something has happened that has been unexpected and does not conform with your standard operating procedures. It can be minor, can be an administrative typo on a report, or it can be a major issue that is a systemic issue within your laboratory, for example. 17020 requires that you take actions to eliminate the causes of nonconformities, and you must define procedures and requirements for how you're going to identify those nonconformities, how you determine the root cause of those nonconformities, how you correct what's happened, how you evaluate the need for any additional action, how you record all of what you're doing, and then how you go on to review the effectiveness of any corrective action that you may have taken. So I'm going to go into and briefly demonstrate our ME corrective action workflow within Qualtrics. Anyone can access this workflow on the ME side of our operations, and it starts with providing a description or summary of the issue. I'm going to say that something bad happened. This is a mock workflow. I discovered this issue today. Our pathologists were involved in this issue, and Dr. Pirwani is the department head. I have the opportunity to scan and upload any documents that I want to upload in relation to this incident. And I'm going to submit that workflow to our quality manager for review, at which point our quality manager will access that workflow and decide whether or not this needs to be categorized as a corrective action, which we are currently discussing, a preventive action, which really involves issues in which opportunities for improvement can be identified prior to something going wrong. So these are suggestions for improvement. We have a category of incident within our system. That's when something minor happens, but we still want to document it and address it. Or our quality manager can indicate that this is not a quality issue. So maybe it's really a safety issue or it's an HR related issue, but it's not related to the quality management of our operations. So here I'm going to indicate that this is a corrective action. And my preliminary comments here And then our quality manager sees all of the information that was previously entered into this workflow as well. He's going to initiate a corrective action and access that workflow again and outline the root cause. Here I'm going to say that there was inadequate training for an autopsy technician. And then I'm going to list what cases were impacted, what the effective time frame was, any stakeholders for the office that may have been impacted, and the acceptability of non-conforming work. I'm going to say one case only. And our plan here is additional training for our technician. And then here is all of the summary information that was previously provided at prior steps of the workflow. I'm going to implement this corrective action plan. And at this point in time, the corrective action workflow will move to the monitoring phase and can hang out within our quality manager's Qualtrics inbox for any period of time. For a smaller issue, it may be a couple of days. For a large systemic issue, it could be 6 months or more. But at the end of that monitoring period, he can indicate whether or not stakeholders were notified, if we were required to notify stakeholders. He can log whether all additional components of the corrective action are complete. And we're going to say that we did this in a 1-month time frame. And ultimately was the corrective action effective in remediating the issue. And at that point in time, we have finalized our corrective action workflow, and it is completed and documented within Qualtrics. And then lastly, I'll just mention very briefly some additional 17020 points of interest. These were some things that we found in the 17025 document that we really needed to establish. We needed to expand our policies or provide better documentation. Both the 17020 and 17025 document discuss impartiality and independence of your operation, and you need to address how that happens and how that is maintained. There are a lot of administrative requirements, including the reporting structure of your operation that needs to be documented and defined. Things like chain of command, your organizational charts, job descriptions for all employees. Personnel requirements are pretty extensive within 17020, including requirements for training documentation, authorization of individuals, and ensuring the ongoing competence of individuals that are performing work in your facilities. The standard requires that there be a complaint and appeals process, requires an internal audit of your operations on an annual basis, also requires you to establish a preventive action procedure, which I discussed very briefly during the corrective action workflow, and then requires you to conduct an annual management system review of your operations in order to assess how you've done, evaluate your operations, and continue to strive for improvement in everything that you do. Hopefully, I was able to give you a taste of what we are doing, and using the knowledge that we have gained in our experiences with laboratory accreditation and applying it to the ME side of your operation. I thank you for your attention, and I think we have another speaker at this point in time. If not, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Dr. Howe. I appreciate it. It was a great overview. Like Dr. Howe mentioned, if you have any questions, please feel free to add them into the questions section of the GoTo event. We do have another speaker. Roger Muse, the VP of Business Development with ANAB, has joined us today as well. Roger, I'll let you go through your slides. Thank you.
Great, thank you. My name is Roger Muse. I'm with the ANSI ASQ National Accreditation Board. We're more commonly known as ANAB. We are known mostly as an accreditation body. We accredit the management system certification bodies here in the United States, who then certified in 9001, ISO 9001. We also accredit laboratories to ISO 17025, and the inspection bodies to 17020. The other thing we're known for is as a training provider. We train mostly to the 17,000 series standards, and I'll go through those here. So if you just go to the next slide. Okay, so as I said, we're mostly accrediting laboratories, inspection bodies, and management system certifiers. We're half owned by ANSI, half owned by ASQ. We're signatory to the International Laboratory Accreditation Cooperation. We operate in a bunch of different countries around the world, and as you can see here, we're just almost approaching 26 years in the industry, and we are non-government, not-for-profit. Next slide. Okay, so these are examples of standards that we accredit organizations to. So, for instance, a crime scene unit within a police department is more likely now, as we turn to 2017, more likely to be pursuing 17020, just like a medical examiner office, etc. However, the laboratory within a police agency is going to pursue 17025 accreditation. That's specific for laboratories. A lot of the equipment that's being used in these laboratories, in fact, a lot of manufacturers in general actually would go pursue a certification, and that would be ISO 9001 certification, and those entities would be certified by a certification body who would be accredited here, as you see in front of you, ISO 17021. So these are there's a lot of different paths and avenues for organizations to go through to get accreditation, certification. It really just depends on what it is the entity is doing, who's pursuing either accreditation or certification. Next slide. As it relates to the forensic world, I've laid it out here in 4 blocks. You've got laboratories, and typically any type of testing or calibration laboratory would then achieve ISO 17025. The crime scene units, 17020, likewise with the medical examiners. And as Dr. Howe mentioned earlier, one of the requirements inside 17025 is proficiency testing and interlaboratory comparisons, and there's section 5.9 in the 17025 standard. You'll see requirements to meet the PT initiative. So what you would do here in some cases is you would elect to use a PT provider. Well, what we do is we accredit the PT providers to 17043. This standard evolved from a former ISO guide 43, several years ago into 17043. Next slide. Okay, so, and as Dr. Howe also mentioned, we recently acquired AskCloud Lab. So AskCloud Lab, the legal entity, has been dissolved, and we now operate as one organization, as ANAB. We're keeping the AskCloud Lab name simply as a DBA because of the name in the industry. So if I could go to the next slide, please. Well, also just wanted to make mention that what's been interesting for us as an accreditation body is that we, likewise, we use Qualtrics to manage our internal management system here at ANAB. We, as I said earlier, we are an accreditation body. We accredit conformity assessment bodies, so crime scene units in this respect, laboratories, medical examiner offices, etc. This helps our organization keep into compliance with the standard that we are evaluated against by folks like ILAC, who I mentioned earlier, the International Laboratory Accreditation Cooperation, the people who audit us, and all the other accreditation bodies. We use Qualtrics to manage that system. In fact, Qualtrics is in our offices today, demonstrating some higher level opportunities that we might be able to pursue with this software. So if I go to the next slide, I'll make mention of one of the last things I've just wanted to touch on, which I think is germane to this community, is that ANAB has engaged in a strategic alliance with NAME, and ANAB will be administering the NAME accreditation. Through this process, and in addition to this process, I should say, the MEs will also have an opportunity, if they choose to pursue 17020 accreditation in addition to the NAME accreditation. We'll be offering training to this standard, in multiple fashions, but one at an upcoming conference, and we're also willing to host the trainings at medical examiner offices if they're interested. If they want to host a regional training, we'll be willing to come out there and do that. With that said, I don't know if there's one more slide there. Nope, that's it. So like Dr. Howard said, I'm more than happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Roger. So if there are any questions, feel free to type them in the questions section of the GoTo event. It does look like we've run over on time just a little bit, so what we may do is get back individually with those that do have those questions so that we can answer them for you. And we want to thank you very much for your time today. Thank you, Dr. Howe, and thank you, Roger, for joining this event. And if there are any questions, feel free to reach out to myself at krux@qualtrics.com, and I'm more than happy to field those questions for you. Thank you all and have a wonderful day.